Hi everyone, Darren Hunter here. I am with Michael Sands. This is the Outsourcing PM podcast. Is it the Outsource PM podcast show? That's cool. We've covered some awesome topics, and I just really encourage you to go back into the library, whether you're looking at on our website page or on Spotify or iTunes or Podbean. Go and have a look at the amazing library of content that we've already done. I think we're up to episode 21, 22, Michael, but and it's become a real toolbox as well, hasn't it? That you can refer people back to those episodes on anything they're really querying on.
I just can't believe how many we've done. We've had so many people now say they've got so much knowledge around, hiring a virtual assistant, knowing what to do, streamlining their business just from the podcast. I never really realized how much of a reach it actually had.
And I've been on a journey with using virtual assistants since 2007, and you've been on a similar journey. You've obviously gone in a lot deeper, and using virtual assistants are an amazing solution to your property management team. Of course, there's certain things that VAs cannot do. But what we're going to cover today, everybody, are things that your property management team simply cannot do. 5 things that your team cannot do without the help and assistance of virtual assistants. And I'm really excited about this because this stuff is just clearly the truth. And we're going to be putting some truth on the table today, everybody, because quite frankly, in a lot of cases, particularly in Australia and New Zealand, our property management service can really suck, particularly to prospective tenants in regards to getting back to them with all their inquiries. So many times tenants are ignored, they put through a query, they never get any answer back, they get ghosted. And we just think, well, that's just the way it is. Or, Michael, we have this attitude towards tenants that they're second-class citizens. And in this day and age of huge demand going on, where we're seeing unprecedented, for example, where I'm based here in Adelaide, we're talking about like a 0.2% vacancy rate, where it's extreme 30, 50 people applying for one property. I know those people are not being serviced, they're not being communicated with. So let's put this one on the table, Michael. The first thing that a property management team cannot do without a virtual assistant is answering every tenant inquiry. So over to you, Michael. You had 650 properties in Melbourne, and you were able to say to prospective clients that every prospective tenant inquiry will be professionally answered. Using a virtual assistant, how did you do that?
Yeah, and I guess I can also say that because I see so many agencies, and I knew the agency like where I used to work at prior to having my own. A lot of inquiries get missed, and there's also a case of agencies thinking, well, that property is going to rent anyway. What does it matter if I don't return those calls? Or they're going to go into the tenant booking system, and I'll just send them all a message directly each, and whoever responds back, I guess that's who I'll deal with. We, as you know, we had so many properties, over 600 properties on virtual reality. So it was important for us that if anyone made an inquiry, that they got to see the property. And when I was doing my listing presentations, I could say to every owner that one of our points of difference was that I guarantee that every person that makes an inquiry on your property will get to see the property, right? 100% of the people that make the inquiry. And I said to people, when you're asking around other agents, if you do, ask that question: what percentage of my inquiries will actually see my property? And the reason why people don't get to see the property or deal with a property manager is the property manager is too busy to take the call, or the inspection times don't suit the prospects that want to actually view the property. So we made it really easy. Now, by having the virtual assistant, it meant that it wasn't reliant on me to take the call or the inquiry. The call comes through, it gets answered. They take the query down, they go through the properties that they're interested in, they'll send them the virtual tour, the video walkthrough tour, the application process, video on how to apply for a property. So the tenant has that information then and there. And based on that information that the VA provides them, the tenant can make an application that we will make a determination on just them seeing a virtual tour, right? The other thing too, Darren, is it meant that if they saw the virtual tour and they really wanted to physically see the property, 100% we'll show them through. because all that time wasting is now gone. Now, my involvement or our property manager's involvement in that process was zero, right? Which meant that the property manager had the time to actually do the things that mattered, talk to the owners, help customer service, income generating. So the VA, in effect, was the leasing person, the leasing manager. Their impediment was, they can't do anything physical, but by arming them with the virtual tour, the video walkthrough, photos, floor plans, they were just as effective, if not more as effective, than a leasing manager because they could speak to every single person.
Yeah, I think it's amazing because I know that you also had your phone inquiries, your leasing inquiries answered by virtual assistants as well, which is awesome. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But Michael, I think, the takeaway for people listening, watching this podcast at the moment is this is an amazing, strong point of difference. It's going to make you stand out with prospective clients because most prospective clients, at the point that you're dealing with them and communicating with them, they want best rent, best tenant in the fastest possible time. You can come out with a strong point of difference like that. That's really going to get their attention because you know full well that your competitors down the road aren't doing those things. And so you can get a real edge and impress because you only have to impress them to get over the line. You sign up the management, they'll sign up at your fees, and your competitors get nothing. So I think that's a great way to use a virtual assistant. And of course, your normal property management team without a VA will not be able to do that. So that'll be cementing.
And just in that too, Dan, remember like when we do our secret shopping, how many property management companies and leasing agents do not return the phone call?
Yeah.
Right. And we know we've got sample data from across Australia, America, UK, New Zealand. There's a high proportion that do not make that return call.
Yeah. Yeah. And so your customer service levels and callbacks and getting back to people are going to skyrocket when you've got a virtual assistant doing that for you. And I just encourage you, get in contact with Michael. Just go to teamsbydesign.com if you want to chat to Michael about that. By the way, we've got 30 tasks that you can actually outsource to virtual assistants. We've got the full list available to you. Just go to teamsbydesign.com. That's teamsbydesign.com. Michael, let's move on to the second thing that a typical property management team can't do without using a virtual assistant, of course, doing the right things. Now, you also, out of your 650 properties that you had in Melbourne, in a 2-year period, you bragged a 0 late rent, not one tenant behind one day. I've never heard of that before. I've never seen that before. And you did that with virtual assistants. Again, another amazing brag point that you can be giving to prospective clients. That's something that your competitors would never be able to say. Using virtual assistants, how did you achieve 0 late rent with all your tenants? How did you do that?
So there was no magic dust that I sprinkled and it happened, overnight, right? What we did was we had, and we trained the virtual assistants to do this rather than being aggressive in rent collection. We changed our strategy to be rather friendly. So our team would call and say, "Hey, let's say what's the date today? Let's say the date today is the first of the month. Let's say I would know by 10 o'clock in the morning that we won't be getting any more money in our account today, right? Because there's only we'll get paid into the bank account, by BPay. Everyone was on BPay. So our team then, if the rent wasn't in the account, our team would call and say, "Hey, Darren, it's Michael, IGT Realty. How are you?" You'd say, "Good." I say, "We just want to know. We just want to check in. How's everything going?" And depending on that response, you might say, "You know what? Things are tough," or "Things are great." We knew which way to go. And say, "Hey, Darren, the reason why we ask is rent was due today. Hasn't hit our account yet. We wanted to check, make sure everything's okay so we can call the owner and let them know." And it was a series of calls like that we re-educated people to say, "Well, if you paid the rent, on the 28th or 29th, it'll be in our account today. And then you won't have this issue. What we want to avoid is when you do move out, see this copy of the ledger. We don't want it to show that you're any days over because the other agencies may look at that and it may affect you." And conversations like that were really motivating and encouraging. And then, you get the serial late payers that just do it in protest, right? They don't want to pay on time in protest. I found killing them with kindness, helping them out. Just, is there anything you need at the property done? Is there any maintenance? It's perfect, no problem. Just checking on this. Are you okay? I know. Going through a series of that, it just kind of wore them out over 2, 3, 4 months. And this worked for us. This has worked for numerous other agencies around Australia and New Zealand. Agencies that I've consulted on have tried that approach, and they've gone from like double digits down to like less than 1%, just by changing the narrative of how they collect rent. It took us probably somewhere between 6 and 9 months to get it to that. But once it was there, everyone was really educated. And on our onboarding process, we made it really clear. So it wasn't a problem for new tenants.
Wow, that's great. So again, just get in touch with Michael, teamsbydesign.com, have a chat, book in it. And also, if you got that email regarding this podcast, you've got a link on the email as well, where you can book into Michael's diary. Have a chat, because this stuff is extraordinary. If you can nail this stuff, and it's not hard with the right virtual assistants doing the right thing, you're going to have an amazing brag point of difference that your competitors simply cannot replicate, that you're going to be winning those management agreements because you're able to achieve these things. Again, these are the things that give your clients, prospective clients, nightmares that their rent's not going to get paid. You're just showing them how you actually have a near or a perfect result when it comes to collecting the rent using virtual assistants. Okay, next point, Michael, is getting your vacancy rates. Now, you also had another brag point of, in a 2-year period, you had 0 vacancy across your 650 properties, which was spread over 84 suburbs, which is obviously the spread of a very big metropolitan area in Melbourne. And you had that brag point. Now, I get it. At the moment, there's some very strong demand going on in rental properties, but you didn't have that strong demand at that time. You had a normal market, probably a soft market. How did you achieve that using virtual assistants?
So getting the vacancy rates down, we use a number of tools. As you know, we use virtual tours and video walkthroughs. We use QR codes. So we made it really easy for people. For one, we made it really easy for people to rent property with us by giving them all the information. We also made sure that our leases ended at the same time. Well, between 2 times in the year. I think it was like around February and July is when the 2 lease cycles would come up. And if someone was to move in like in April, let's say, we would do a pro rata portion of the lease, but they would all fall into the same cycle. So you're looking at leases between 12 months and 20 months going into our property. That also meant that because we had virtual tours and videos, like if someone gave notice today in Victoria, 28 days notice, we could have effectively market the place as at today, which meant that we had a greater chance of renting the property out faster. We also had our average length of lease was over 18 months because in general, people stayed with us for a while, because it was good for them. Well, I found with our tenants when we surveyed them, they were happy managing, renting their property through us. And so there was a high satisfaction with the tenants there, lower turnover. And, we're able to give them the service that they needed. And I think part of that too, Darren, was having that phone line available for them to call us and ask us any questions wherever they needed. And the virtual team would reply to them. Like there was never that problem.
No, it's amazing. I think it's an amazing brag point. I just want to say to everyone as well, we've already done a whole podcast on these topics previously. Just go back into the catalog, into the library of the Outsourced PM podcast show. You'll find there's a podcast there just on using virtual assistants to chase late rent. We did a whole podcast just on that. We've done a whole podcast just in getting your vacancy rates right down. So we've covered and we go into a lot more detail. So just go back into the previous podcasts that we've done. There's only about 22 there so far up to the day. And you'll be able to find those topics if you want to dig deeper and just go into a lot more meatier level. All right, the next one that we've got here, and this is a big one, Michael. I mean, we're smashing mindsets here, old school mindsets. Particularly mine as well, at 90%. I've got here 90% of the repairs can be carried and done by virtual assistants. Now, already people's mindsets are going off. How is that possible? How can they do that without any experience? All those sorts of things. Michael, how can virtual assistants carry repairs? And just to remind everyone, we've already done a podcast on this one as well. But Michael, how is that possible?
We have like I would call it a foolproof matrix, right? Where we can have any new assistant come, and we have like an intranet matrix where you can type in things like hot water or electrical or power not turning on, and just keyword searches, and up will come a bunch of information on our intranet, the questions to ask the tenant. So we get all the information, photos, videos, room, age of appliance, tips and tricks, YouTube videos. When people call in the office, like tenants or tradespeople, they're repetitious questions. And as property managers are so busy, they can't always get to those questions, especially around maintenance. And I see maintenance is a big issue for a lot of people. I see their inboxes are filling up with maintenance on their web portals. They're all filling up. We, trained the VAs on a high level, but also on a low level to be able to do triage on things like 80, 90% of what the maintenance is. And I found that by giving them that matrix, by giving them that information, they were able to ask the right questions, contact the owner with some levels of confidence, call the right tradespeople. And I love what they do, Darren, is when they get a job, like let's say it's an urgent repair or a non-urgent repair, and they've got the list of preferred tradespeople from the agency, they would, rather than just kind of sending the work order off to the agent, off to the tradesperson straight away, they call them and just say, hey, look, I've got this job. This is the situation. What's your capacity to do it within X amount of time frame? And we find that out. And if it's not a reasonable time frame, we call the next tradesperson and book them in until we can get the job done faster, because that increases the satisfaction level of the tenant. But it also meant, Darren, that my involvement for 90% of those tasks is basically zero. Right? And all these things are being done in the background. I trust my tradespeople that are on the preferred list. We've got the matrix there for the VA to use. So there's no real major deviation for them to have to think too laterally, about what the cause of problem is. They collect the information, give it to the tradesperson, and the team just kind of works itself. But the oversight I have is daily reports and end of day reports. I skim through it and I see what's happening. So I don't lose total visibility, but I haven't had to do too much.
Wow, no, that's awesome. And we do, of course, have a podcast already done on using virtual assistants with repairs. We've gone in a lot deeper there. So go and check out that episode as well. All right, Michael, number 5 is, one more thing on that repairs. I know and remember my days as a property manager, it was taking up to 2 hours a day. 2 hours a day, 20 up to 25% of a property manager's time is taken up with repairs. And so by unburdening your team with even up to 90% of those tasks done for them, can you imagine what extra work they can be doing, more high value, more dollar productive, more customer service, freeing them up, taking the pressure off, extending their career lifespan with you. The lists of benefits are just endless when you're able to take off the real time-consuming, burdensome stuff off the shoulders of your team. That's what virtual assistants do. Again, we've got up to 30 tasks they can successfully do. Just go to teamsbydesign.tasks.com. We've got the list there. Download it. Of course, get in touch with teamsbydesign.com and just chat to Michael or book into Michael's diary on the email that you got regarding this podcast or whatever. You've got a link there. Just book straight into Michael's diary. But you've got various ways to get in touch. Okay, Michael. So the next one, which is another big chunky task that you can take off your property managers that I just think erodes their heart, mind, and soul, is dealing with just general phone inquiries and emails. They've been peppered, like water eroding a cliff. It's taking that burden off. How can virtual assistants take that burden off property managers?
As you know, Darren, like even we have our executive assistants that go through all of our emails, and they They check all our emails, they run our diary, they return phone calls for us, not as us, but as them. But they're able to do a lot of the triage work for us. If you send me an email, Darren, saying, "Hey, Michael, can we catch up on Friday at 2 p.m.?" Charlotte will see that email and she'll check my diary and book that in. So it's another thing that I don't have to worry about. And I communicate with Charlotte, as you do too, with Bev, saying, "Hey, I'm not available on Fridays between 1 and 2," and so they know when I'm blocked out, and they book my life around that. In property management, having someone go through the emails, every single email, and work out what a triage is. "Hey, Darren, this is really important for you to read," or "Hey, Darren, this was maintenance and I've done this with that," or this tenant is looking to move out, or even responding to all the tenant prospect inquiries that have come through. You can even have someone do it after hours, Darren. You can have someone do it on the weekend. We have clients where they're executives working for 3 or 4 hours on a Saturday, answering the phone calls, making sure that if anyone's calling wanting to book into an inspection or view a property, that someone's there. That means that the physical person in the office, you don't really need to have that person who's working every Saturday.
Mm.
I see people coming in from 9 till 3 every Saturday, and if there's nothing to do, they're still stuck there.
Mm.
What if you didn't have to be?
Yeah, correct. Mindsets are probably firing off with people that are listening to this, Michael. So let's, I'll put my old school property manager hat on here. And what about time zones? They'd want that, a virtual assistant working in their time zone. What's the answer to that?
Yeah, so the time zones are fine. I mean, like Philippines to Australia is only between 2 hours and 3 hours difference. It's an ideal time zone for them. Even New Zealand, like they start earlier, 2 hours earlier than that for New Zealand. But they finish 2 hours earlier. So it's not like their day is.
And they're happy to have an earlier finish, aren't they? I know that they love earlier starts and earlier finishes, Okay, so the next one is, what about their written English skills? If they're sending emails off on your behalf, answering on your behalf, people are thinking, well, are they going to be having broken English? Are they going to be, what's your response to that?
Well, I mean, a lot of their English is better than Australians and Kiwis who write English. The only thing to be mindful of is making sure the computer is set to British English, not USA English, because of the Zs and the theirs and the favourites and everything. That's the only thing that I would be worried about. But more often than not, they're very polite, they're very formal, they're very instructional with their emails. If anything, you just need to help them put some humanity into the email, relatability.
Okay, well, the next mindset issue that people would have is, I wouldn't want them speaking to my clients or tenants or anything like that and doing my phone calls. If they need to call someone and say, can we rebook you in for this or something? What about, their verbal English skills? Yeah,
and that's a fair point too. Some people have that concern because they've never dealt or spoken with someone in the Philippines. They think it's like speaking with a telco company or utilities company, things like that. Darren, you get to choose who you work with. You get to listen to the person, speak to the person. You get to choose that person who you get to work with. And you got to remember too, like Australia, New Zealand, we're all so multicultural. Most people who you call have an accent, right? Most people, and people are really tolerable to that. I find people get short and frustrated when they don't have their question answered, right? Where it has to get escalated, or the person doesn't know how to find the information, or they're not offering any level of service to satisfy the inquiry. But Darren, if you were to call up a pizza restaurant and they said, look, it's going to take us an hour and a half to 2 hours to get the pizza out tonight, you're probably going to say, look, I'll call another one, and if I can't get it faster, I'll call you back, right? You keep calling until you find something. Same with getting booking into a hairdresser, or if you're trying to find a movie and the cinema's booked, you'll find another cinema and another cinema. People keep calling until they get their value, their satisfaction right away. If you can give the person that value and that satisfaction, which is what most tenants and what most tradespeople want in the call, it's done. There's no escalation point. There's no frustration. If you don't take the call, if you don't reply to them, if you don't get back to them, if you don't give them what they need, they get frustrated.
I think it's important to understand that when Teams by Design recruit, out of every 100 applications, only about 2 get through to being employed, because there's an 11-point check, a list or things or filters that the team goes through, the teams by design people go through to put this person through a funnel of series of checks. We actually do have a podcast of 11 checkpoints of recruiting a virtual assistant. It's a few episodes back from this one. Go and have a look at that. You can see the stringency there, particularly around their verbal English skills. They are tested on that, and of course are interviewed by the clients, the real estate clients, before they're employed. So you never take on anyone that you're uncomfortable with. And I know with our executive assistant Bev, that really runs a lot of IGT, I would never have a hassle at her getting on the phone and calling our valued clients and customers, and communicating with people. And I know you're the same with Charlotte as well. She's exceptional. They are out there. They're very, very good. Teams by Design have a very strict process in place to find those people. So Michael, again, what's the easiest way for people to get in touch with you?
Yep, just go to teamsbydesign.com, contact us, and just jot down your details, and we'll come back to you and book a time in.
Yeah, or, if you've got access to an email that we sent this podcast to you, there's a link on there. You can book straight into Michael's diary. So I think that was a really good podcast. Another good one, Michael, to add to the library. Very informative. And thanks everyone. And we'll see you in the next podcast.
Great. Thanks everyone.